This is Magic and How to Fix It. This episode, The Day He Was a Cat, read by Molly O'Donnell.
Draped across the bed, Arthe lazily waved his wand, drawing an illusion of light in the centre of the room, in the shape of a cat. Spike wagged his tail happily at the sight and lunged at it. He gave chase, and Arthe led him round and round until he was panting. "This room is filthy," his mum said as she placed a basket of clean laundry on the bed. "Fine, I have a system," he said. It was a good one too. The pile of clothes by the door were all dirty. The ones on the chair, perfectly wearable. They didn't smell or anything. "How can you live like this?" she asked, to no response. "Have you done your homework? I'm going to get my hair done at the seafront. Make sure it's done by the time I get back. Clean this place up." Her voice exasperated as she walked out. Arthe let out a sigh and sat up. "And don't use any spells. We don't want a repeat of the plaza incident," she added, leaving the door open for Spike to stroll through behind her. "Close the door," he called out, knowing she wouldn't. He waited for their footsteps to trail off before rolling his eyes. He lifted his wand and then huffed as he thought about the time that he accidentally sent his dirty clothes down to the town plaza. How embarrassed he felt when his entire class was talking about his dirty boxers hanging from the bakery awning. He lowered his wand and kicked all the clothes together and hauled them into the wardrobe. He fought with the door, forcing it to close with the weight of his whole body. Then he drew his wand and locked it. He wasn't sure how he'd get his clothes out again, but that's a problem for the future. Judging by the laundry basket, he had at least a week of clean clothes, 2 if he was extra careful. Usually, he did his homework in the very last minute. Tomorrow, though, he had an assignment that he couldn't just scribble out quickly in the cart in the morning. He had to summon a familiar. He barely remembered the class. He had been distracted by the senior year's class on pyrotechnics, took place on the field overlooked by his classroom. He trudged down the stairs and into the living room, where a wall of bookshelves stood tall and proud, housing a large collection of stories and tomes passed down through the family. He collected a tome that seemed about right and trudged back the way he came. The tome opened with a cloud of dust. This particular copy of The Divine Art of Summoning and Transfiguration had doodles along the margins of select pages, perhaps done by Mildred, whose name was written in a cutesy font on the front page. The large tome had no index or contents, as a modern book would have had. It was expected that a young wizard would be studious enough to read the entire thing. Arthe banged his head on the tome, hoping that the words would transfer through sheer force. They didn't. He plunged into the content one painfully boring page at a time, scouring titles and images for clues of what each spell might contain. The pages were worn and old. The ink had mostly faded. Some of the pages were even stuck together. After a few long pages filled from edge to edge with what he felt was boring, irrelevant text, he saw something that excited him. An image of a tabby cat. He practiced the hand movements described on the page. Once he was ready, he lifted his wand and put the gestures and the words together. His energy splattered out of him and out through the wand. He looked around the room. Nothing happened. There was no cat. Not on the rug, not under the bed. Hopefully, not in the wardrobe. He listened for a meow. Nothing. He reread the page, noting his mistake, and recited the spell once again. This time, energy roared through him, narrowing through the wand. A tingle rushed down his spine and spread out through his body. Dizziness shuddered through him, and then the room began to grow, furniture and all, bigger and bigger until he was eye to eye with a huge dust bunny under his bed. He sneezed. Still no cat. Frustrated, he huffed. He took a few steps back. How did I end up on all fours? He thought to himself. He straightened up. He felt completely unbalanced, and still he could barely see over his mattress. He crawled forward on all fours, and when he looked in the mirror, he didn't see a small boy on his hands and knees. He saw a tabby cat, tail and all. He let out a screech that materialised as a yowl. His mum would know how to fix this. Why did she say she was going again? She would be home soon anyway. He just needed to wait. Arthe's ears picked up. He heard something, but wasn't sure if he recognised the sound. Everything was louder. It was a scratchy, thudding sound, and it was getting louder. Not louder. Closer. He ventured out of the open door, glad his mum had not cared enough to close it once again. Spike stood in the hallway, his head cocked to one side. "It's me!" he tried to say, but his throat only produced a strained meow.
The bulldog's mouth sagged at the corners, and saliva pooled and dripped from it.
His hackle stood up, and he hissed instinctively. Spike took a curious step towards him, and he knew he was in big trouble if he stayed out in the hall. He rushed forwards. His little legs carried him down the stairs and through the house. The scratching of claws on wood followed him behind. The living room door was wide open. He jumped shakily onto the coffee table and then the sofa, followed easily by the hound hot on his heels. He needed to try someplace higher. He scrambled up the bookshelf, knocking down trinkets along the way. The dog stood on his hind legs, barking up at him. Between the barking and the noise from the street, his senses were completely overwhelmed. Gentle breeze brushed his whiskers. Oh, a breeze! The window was wide open. He calculated as best he could, and then he launched over the dog and out the open window. Outside was a whirlwind of scents. There were so many he couldn't pick his mum's scent out. He walked along the streets of Rotherhithe, trying to navigate his way to the salon. Everything looked different from down so low. If he could just find his mum, he was sure that she could help him. He hurried down the street as fast as his little legs could carry him. Everything looked completely different. He kept moving. Even when he made a wrong turn, he kept going until eventually he saw the sand and sea. He followed along the seafront, peeking through the glass windows of the stores, hoping to see his mother laughing in a chair. The seabirds chirped as they circled a nearby bin for scraps. His eyes grew wide, and he crouched on the spot. He stalked slowly towards them, tail thrashing behind him. He almost pounced, but the sound of a bell and a woman's voice scared them away. It was his mum! Her bright red hair looked grey, but it shone in the sunlight nonetheless. He nuzzled her leg. She pet him soft and gentle. Then she straightened up and began walking. He couldn't believe it. His own mum didn't recognise him at all. Well, he was a cat, he supposed. But that shouldn't change anything. He followed her along the street. She was no doubt looking forward to scolding him for not tidying his room. She didn't go back the way he had come. Instead, she slipped off into the market. He looked around frantically, sniffing the air in every direction. Just as he was about to brave the crowd, a voice spoke from above. "Oh, what a sweet little kitty! I've never seen you before." The strange woman was wearing black boots and long stripy socks. He tried to pass her, but she stepped in front of him. "Do you want a treat, little guy?" Then he smelled the most delicious thing he'd ever smelt before. All thoughts of home disappeared, and it was only him and the slice of ham waggling in his face. He followed the trail of deli meats with no sense of danger. Then a door shut behind him, and suddenly he was surrounded by smells. New smells. Cat smells. He couldn't quite discern how many cats were in the house, but it smelt like a lot. There was a litter tray in the corner and dust scattered around the wooden floors. There was no way out that he could see. The windows were slightly ajar, with a kind of net on the outside. This lady didn't take any chances. She bent down, and he backed away a little. "Don't be scared. I'm not going to hurt you, little guy," she said, scratching under his chin. He found himself leaning in. She picked Arthe up too easily for his liking and placed him down on the sofa. She pulled out her wand and created a little mouse made out of light. He knew this trick. He wouldn't fall for it. She waved it back and forth. His eyes followed every movement. Its tail wiggled in a way that surprised him, intrigued him even. Then he sprung for it, claws out, but it slipped away, making him even more determined. He chased the mouse until he was panting. Maybe this isn't so bad, this being a cat thing. He knew his mum would be missing him badly, searching for him frantically if he didn't return home tonight. "Let's get you some dinner," he heard the strange woman say from the next room. He stretched his tired body out, feeling all the kinks of his new cat body. It just didn't feel like enough. He stretched more and more until he was growing into a boy again. How would he explain? He wasn't planning to stick around long enough for that. Once he was human-sized, he quickly collected himself. He rushed out the door, leaving it open behind him, and jogged home, through the front door and up the stairs. His mum spun on her heels. The wardrobe door was open, and behind her the clothes spilled out from it. "And where exactly have you been?" He just pulled her into a tight embrace. Her arms were rigid at her side, but she laid her head onto his. "Don't think you're getting out of cleaning this mess up," she said sweetly.